So the Quran is probably the most important topic, but this is the 8th lecture on Islam 101. I wanted to delay it so that everybody has really a good grasp of what Islam is. But everything in Islam is based on the Quran. And there are many verses in the Quran that are explained by the hadith and the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ. So that's why next time I'll be talking about the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith. These are the references for the entire course. We went through it before. These are the topics we talked about so far. And today we're talking about the introduction to the Quran. Next time we'll talk about the hadith, inshallah. So just very briefly, I'll talk about what is the Quran, how it was revealed, the organization of the Quran and when it was organized, the language, collection, how the Quran was collected, the message of the Quran, which is the most important thing trying to emphasize on, and glimpses on some of the chapters and verses from the Quran. Quran comes the root word qara'a, and I spelled it in English here. Qara'a, it's three letters, and as you know, the Arabic language is all consonants. The vowels are not written except with signs on top of the letters. So, and there is a letter that does not exist except in the Arabic language, which is the hamza, qara'a. So no other language has this. And that's why you find in the Bible, it says that the Prophet come from people who stutter, because the hamza seems like you are stuttering a little bit. I don't know that it exists in the Turkish language, the hamza. Yeah, vowels with the hamza, the alif with a small sign on top of it. But do you have? But can you say qara'a?
Yeah, there's like.
Okay. So the Quran, as it states, it is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the direct word of Allah. It is not the word of somebody else on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are tradition in the Quran where the Prophet ﷺ, it was revealed to me and Allah told me that. So these are the words of the Prophet, of something that was revealed to him. So there is a great distinction between when the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah revealed to me, and then when he says that the Quran was revealed to me. Big difference. The Quran is the direct word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it was sent to the Prophet ﷺ through angel Jibreel. As I mentioned before in the first lecture we had, that Islam is defined mainly by the belief in Allah, His last messenger, and the revealed message, which is the Quran. So the Quran consists of 114 chapters, and it was revealed over 23 years to the Prophet ﷺ, and it includes aspects of worship, spirituality, social, as well economic, political, historical, and scientific issues. The Quran came to complete the message of the prophets that came before, and the messages that are mentioned in the Quran that before was the Suhuf of Ibrahim, referring to Prophet Ibrahim, the Zabur of Dawood, and the Torah of Musa, and the Injil of Jesus, which is called the New Testament or the Gospel. How was the Quran revealed? This is according to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It's not mentioned in the Quran. The Quran descended as the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from some place in heaven called the preserved tablet. And it was revealed on one night called the night of power, which is Laylatul Qadr. So the Quran was brought down from the preserved tablet to this universe, to the lower heaven, which is our universe, on the night of power. That's why the night of power during Ramadan has a great meaning for Muslims. And it was revealed over 23 years through angel Jibreel. The time frame for revelation from 610 to 632, which is from beginning of revelation 10 years before Hijrah to 11 years after Hijrah. And so it was 23 years lunar years and 22 years solar years. The revelation came to the Prophet in three methods. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, وَمَا كَانَ لِبَشَرٍ يُكَلِّمُهُ اللَّهُ إِلَّا وَحْيًا أَوْ مِنْ وَرَاءِ حِجَابٍ أَوْ يُرْسَلَ رَسُولًا فَيُوحِي بِإِذْنِهِ مَا يَشَاءُ. No human can talk to Allah except through a veil. Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send an angel or a messenger. ما كان لبشر يكلمه الله إلا من وراء حجاب أو يرسل رسولا فيوحي بإذنه ما يشاء. So the medium for transmission of the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was through angel Jibreel. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can reveal something to human beings through dreams. And also through other means. We don't need to talk about that, but basically for the Prophet ﷺ, there was direct revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that revealed itself in the hadith of the Prophet. He said, Allah has revealed to me, and that was not through Jibreel, but direct revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And through Jibreel in his natural form, and that was very rare. The Prophet ﷺ said he rarely, maybe a few times, he saw Jibreel in his natural form. It was the first time when the first revelation, when he was in Ghar Hira, and then the second was in Isra wal Mi'raj. But all other times Jibreel appeared to him in the form of a human being, and sometimes in a form that he could not see. He could not see him, but he could feel his presence. And the Sahaba, sometimes they saw Jibreel, maybe on very few occasions. In some other, most of the time, when the Prophet ﷺ got revelation from Jibreel, the Sahaba could not see Jibreel, and the Prophet ﷺ also could not see him, but you could feel his presence, and the revelation would come on him. And the Prophet ﷺ, during this, used to be subjected to very, very heavy physical exhaustion. The Sahaba used to see him profoundly sweating. Also, if he was on his camel, the camel has to sit down. The camel could not go. When the Prophet got the revelation, the camel used to lay down. The organization of the Quran, the Quranic chapters were organized by order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by Jibreel. And that happened in the last year of the life of the Prophet. Before, the Sahaba remembered the verses and the chapters, but did not organize them in a certain way. They used to say, we remember Surah Al-Zumar, we remember Surah Al-Baqarah, but how it was organized in the last year of the life of the Prophet, and Jibreel came to him and told him, organize the chapters this way. And you'll see the wisdom of that later on. So the verses of the Quran are gathered into chapters. The Sahaba, Salaamu Alaikum. The Sahaba knew the chapters from the very beginning. And the Quran has 114 chapters and 6,236 verses. The Sahaba and the scholars have counted the letters. Every letter has been accounted in the Quran from very early on. Assalamu alaikum, Jose. How are you? So nobody can take one letter. I mean, there are some enemies of Islam have tried to spread some Quran that's modified, And any person, there are millions of people who memorize the Quran. You cannot fool the Muslims about that. This one thing, Muslims cannot be fooled about it. And there are some corrupt Quran has spread some time. Somebody actually put some corrupt Quran here sometime to remove it from the shelves. Many years after the Prophet ﷺ, to make the Quran easier for people, the scholars, and it's mentioned, it was Al-Hajjaj. You know the Hajjaj? Okay. He's the one he was an expert in the Quran, despite all the failings that he had. But the Quran was his passion. He used to scribe the Quran. So he divided the Quran into 30 chapters. And each chapter was divided into two parts, and each part was divided into 4 quarters. And the way he divided it is according to the number of letters. He counted the letters. He knew the total number of letters in the Quran, divided them into 30, and then divided each juz into 8 parts, 4 quarters and 4 quarters for the two parts of each chapter. So you can imagine the amount of mathematics that they had to go through to do that. And the scholars, when they talk about the Quran and to teach it to children, they tell them, remember, there are 5 major. The Quran is classified into 5 major parts. The opening of the Fatiha, and which is the opening chapter, and 7 long chapters. These are the long chapters that are at the beginning of the Quran. And then there are the chapters of medium length. Medium length means more than 100 verses. And there are many of them. And then small chapters of less than 100 verses. And then the very small chapters. And the very small chapter is called Al-Mufassal. It starts from Surah Qaf. Do you know Surah Qaf? So Surah Qaf is the beginning of Al-Mufassal, of the short chapters, which are chapters probably 1 page, 2 pages. And sometimes at the end of the Quran, there are very short chapters. The chapters were not, as I mentioned, were not revealed in the same order we have it today. That was by revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Jibreel to the Prophet near the end of his life. The first revealed chapter was the chapter of Iqra, which every one of us know. Iqra, Bismi Rabbika Allazi Khalaq. Read in the name of your Lord who created man out of a clot of congealed blood. Read in the name of your Lord, the most bountiful. He who had taught by the pen taught man which he knew not. Remember, this was revealed to an illiterate nation. The first thing to be revealed to the Arabs in the Quran was read. Tell them, yeah, you have to become a nation of literate people. And this should be taken seriously by all Muslims. Education is the most important thing. Cannot forego education. Education is power. So you cannot be strong without education. Proper education, of course. I mean, there are a lot of education that are worthless, but proper education. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet, and the Prophet was illiterate, he could not read or write. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him, read in the name of your Lord who created man. The last verse was in chapter 2. And fear the day when you shall be brought back to Allah. Then shall every soul be paid what it earned, and none shall be dealt with unjustly. So this really summarizes the goal for every human being, that we shall return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be constantly aware of that day where we are going to meet with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was the last chapter revealed to the Prophet ﷺ just before he died. Remember last time I talked about the last, that was the last verse, but the last chapter is different. What was the last chapter? Yes, Jazakumullah khair. إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ الْفَتْحِ. And that was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ in the Hajj, just few months before he died. Actually, maybe 2 or 3 months before he died. But this verse that I just book. It was the last to be revealed to the Prophet. Last verse from the Quran, and Jibreel told him, put it in Surah Al-Baqarah. The Quran, nothing, no verse came after it.
Nothing.
But Jibreel used to, the chapters did not all come together. But Jibreel would tell the Prophet, these verses, put them in this chapter, and these verses in that chapter, and so on. So you'll find Surah Al-Baqarah, for example, was not revealed all together. And many other surahs. Some surahs came all together in one sitting with the Prophet ﷺ, but some came in pieces. So this verse was the last. Surah Al-Baqarah, the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah was on the first and second year of Hijrah. And that verse was in the last year of Hijrah, just after the Hajj of the Prophet. So the Quran was revealed in Arabic. The Arabian, the Qurashi and most of the Arab tribes, they valued language and poetry and eloquence, and so that's why the Quran was revealed to the Sahaba by recitation, and they perfected the recitation. So it recited in a certain way. That's most people who memorize the Quran do not appreciate anything else. They don't like music. Music can really uplift people spiritually, no doubt, for any human being. So, but people who recite the Quran and memorize it, they found music would interfere with the spirituality of the Quran. The Quran has its own music, and if I memorize a surah and listen to a lot of music, I find that my recitation weakens. And this is my own personal experience, and I heard it from many other people. So you start forgetting the Quran. The Quran has its own spirituality and has its own music. It is known that Prophet David, used to recite the Psalms, and he had such a beautiful voice to the extent the Quran says that the birds used to gather around him and the animals used to gather around him, and the music that he used to say in reciting his book that was be repeated by nature around him. So the Quran is the same thing, spirituality in the Quran. And Muslims recite the Quran in a particular way called tajweed, where you emphasize each letter, and this has preserved the Quran. That when you recite the Quran, people tell you, oh, this letter, you did not emphasize it enough. There are letters that have to take, there is timings in the Quran. There are letters who take one timing, letters take two timings, four timings, and six timings. And this has really preserved the Quran. So anybody who does not keep that timing, person who is really versed in the Quran can wait, stop here. So they helped really preserve the Quran. The Quran has a narrative and a pictorial style unparalleled in any book or any story you would read. Like Prophet Musa, for example, the Quran moves from him being a child and then transfer you. It's as if it's like a movie. When you read the Quran, it's like you are in a movie, and then it talks about Prophet Musa, and then goes back. You know, when you start the movie, somebody recollecting, and then goes back to his childhood. So it's very much like this, very pictorial. The first one who noticed this was Sayyid Qutb. Sayyid Qutb has a beautiful book about the eloquence of the Quran and the pictorial representation in the Quran. The Quran has challenged the Arabs, who were very eloquent, to the extent that they had every year a competition in Mecca where all the poets will come and recite their poetry in front of people in a famous festival or market, and they used to choose the best and they would hang it inside the Kaaba out of respect for that. Many people, because that was a society, that was an oral society, they can hear a poem of 100 verses or so, you don't need to recite it again, they memorize it right away. Imam al-Shafi'i, one of the famous scholars of Islam, he said, I never read a book twice. I read a book once and it just sticks in my mind. So that was the eloquence of these people. The Quran challenged them to come something with the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala challenged them and challenged all of human beings to come with something like the Quran. And nobody failed. Nobody succeeded in doing that. And the challenge was open during the life of the Prophet and after him until the Day of Judgment. How was the Quran collected? As I mentioned, hundreds of Sahaba memorized the Quran by heart. And that was the innate nature of the Arabs and the people in Quraysh. But still the Prophet ﷺ insisted on being written, just for posterity. So the Sahaba wrote the Quran during his lifetime. And during the time of his predecessors, every person who was a scribe kept the Quran in his place, in his house. So Abu Bakr wanted to collect it all in one book, the successor to the Prophet ﷺ. So within 2 years after the death of the Prophet, Abu Bakr ordered everybody who has parchments, anything written in the Quran, to bring it, and he entrusted it to Zayd ibn Thabit, one of the young people at the time of the Prophet, who was very good in language and very smart. So Zayd ibn Thabit, when he collected the Quran, he said, I asked people to have two proofs. So they have to have it written, and somebody else should come and recite it in front of it, or several people recite it, at least. So every verse was subjected to this criterion just before writing the Quran. That book was kept with Hafsa, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ. And during many years later, like 20 years later, during the time of Uthman, when Islam spread all over the world, and then people started to have accents. So they started pronouncing the Quran in their own accents and in their own languages. So they started, Uthman was worrying that really with the different languages, people will start changing the pronunciation of the Quran. The pronunciation, not the words. So he ordered to have 7 copies. And he divided into every province spread. Like, for example, sent to Mecca and Medina, and then one to Yemen, Bahrain, Iraq, Syria, and Egypt. And remember that each one of these provinces, when you say Egypt, you're talking Egypt and North Africa, because Islam spread into North Africa. So Egypt was responsible for North Africa. When you talk about Iraq, you're talking about Iraq, what's called Iran today, and Afghanistan, and Central Asia, and India. So that's the governor of Egypt was responsible for North Africa and Sudan. The governor of Iraq was responsible about all of the East. And Syria was responsible about Palestine, Syria, and part of Turkey and northern Iraq. This is a copy of, this is a picture of one of the copies sent by Uthman. There is only one left in the world. The original copy that was left written at the time of Uthman. This is the Kufi script that they used to use, which is slightly different than the Arabic calligraphy that we use today.
So where is right now that copy?
I think it's Samarkand, Central Asia.
Samarkand is it under the Samarkand is right now under Russia?
It's Uzbekistan. The message of the Quran, I went through this before, emphasize the belief in one God, and Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his last messenger till the end of time. all prophets were sent to their people. Prophet Muhammad was sent to all of human beings. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. Belief in the hereafter and description of the day of judgment, heavens and hellfire, which Islam is the only religion that gives us the details of the account of in the day of judgment. No other religion has any idea about this, and is not mentioned in any of the books before Islam. Quran emphasizes purification through faith and good deeds. And then on the social level, there's legislation for the individual, family, society, economy, and politics of nations. And there are many stories of prior nations, prior messengers, and 25 messengers before, including Prophet Muhammad, are mentioned in the Quran. And the reason these stories are mentioned is for Muslims not to repeat the same mistakes. Human nature is the same. And if you're not aware of the fallings of human nature, people will fall into the same thing. Like, it's amazing, like how, for example, Christianity has changed from the teachings of Jesus, peace be upon him, or Judaism has changed, and but still they believe in God. But you'd be surprised how Hinduism was revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how it has transformed into what it is today, of people worshiping. Every household in India has its own god. There are 300 million gods in India. People give it philosophical explanation, so on, but this is not what the original religion was taught. Many of the old Hindu books speak about one God. If you look at the very old scriptures, speak about one God, and then people have nature of modifying things. I want to talk about some of the chapters, particularly chapter 2. Chapter 2 is called Al-Baqarah, which means the cow. And many people think it's talking about the golden cow that the Banu Israel worship. That's not the case. That's a different story. So it's called the Constitution. Scholars call it the Constitution. Al-Baqarah covered all the aspects of Islam. It's almost 2.5 parts of the Quran, almost 286 verses, and that's why they call it the Constitution. There is a on the year that the Arabia, all the tribes accepted Islam, one tribe came and accepted Islam, and then when they went back, told him, appoint somebody for us to lead us in prayer. So the Prophet said, who knows most? He found the young boy who memorized the whole Baqarah. He said, you become the Imam of this young boy, because he memorized this surah. It covers many aspects of Islam. And the Prophet said, whoever memorizes this surah, and basically memorization means comprehending it, not just memorizing it, comprehending it and acting on it. It will be a great reward on the Day of Judgment. The second chapter is called Family of Imran, Ala Imran. And Ala means the family. And Ala Imran, this is the family of Mary, peace be upon him. So that's talking about the people of the book. And what Jesus taught his people. So it talks about teachings of Jesus and so on. And the surah addresses the tribulations that affected the Muslims at the time. There were many tribulations the Muslim community in Medina went through, so it addresses it. And then there are chapters addressing stories of the prior message. There is surah called Yunus, Jonah, Prophet Jonah, and then Hud, and Yusuf, Joseph, Surah Ibrahim. There is a surah called Ibrahim. There is a surah called Banu Israel, the sons of Israel, talking about the night journey and talking about Banu Israel. There is a surah called Maryam, Mary, the mother of Jesus. Peace be upon all of them.
So, I have a question that the cow, the Baqarah, you say it's not about the...
The golden cow is mentioned in Surah Al-A'raf, but not in Surah Al-Baqarah.
So, on this surah, do you know why it's called Baqarah?
Yes, because there was, it addresses the failings of the followers of Prophet Musa. When they escaped to the Sinai, it was a huge, I mean, Banu Israel were several hundred thousand. So it was a community in itself. So it was afflicted with problems. So what happened is that a person was assassinated. So they came to Prophet Musa, told him, if you are a prophet, tell us who assassinated him. So he told that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to him, tell them to slaughter a cow. So they kept asking questions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked, the moral of the story is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them, slaughter a cow, so slaughter a cow. No, they came back with questions. What kind of cow? And then he told them, a cow, it's young and does not work in the field. And then they told him, what's the color of the cow? Okay, so they kept making it difficult for them. It's as if they don't want the truth to appear. But it is teaching that religion is simple. Don't make it complicated. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not make it complicated for you. So, but they kept making it complicated for them. Until the end, they find that cow. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them, okay, choose a cow that's yellow. And when they found that it was one of its kind, and they had to pay a huge sum of money to get this cow from its owner. So the moral of the story is that you can make it difficult for yourself, you can make a religion difficult for you, or follow what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you. So if they would have slaughtered the cow from the beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have brought the truth. Anyhow, when they slaughtered the cow, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed them to hit the corpse of the deceased with the cow. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala resurrected him, and he told who killed him. And then he died again. So that was the miracle of it. That's why it's called the cow. It's basically, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the believers, do not be difficult in applying the matters of religion. And follow the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do not ask difficult questions. It happened in the Ummah. Sometimes Ummah have asked questions that did not happen. Like, I have one example I always remember. Scholars were debating, if in Ramadan you are fasting, and then you tie a piece of food in a thread, you swallow it, and then you pull it with the thread, does it break your fasting? It's fictitious. Who would do this? But again, so it shows that sometimes we fall into the same trap. We don't need to get to that kind of question. I want to talk about ijaza, because this really the heart of the memorization of the Quran, how people have kept memorizing it, and millions today memorize it. The ijaza, not ajaza, okay, Ashaib? Not ajaza, okay? Ajaza means vacation, but ijaza means permission. Permission to teach the Quran. So nobody can teach the Quran. He must have ijaza. So, and we're talking professional teaching. We all teach each other Quran, but I don't have ijaza. Many of us don't have ijaza, but you teach it, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have a greater reward for that. But ijaza, when some person has ijaza, that ijaza means that he learned the Quran from a teacher, and that teacher learned it from another teacher, until the Prophet ﷺ. And usually they produce a certificate showing, it starts with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This Quran was revealed by Allah to Jibreel, to Muhammad, to Hafs, and goes through to Ibn Umar, to all the chain of narration. The shortest narration, and that was 10 years ago. I mean, I asked about this 10 years ago. It was 25 generation of teachers until the Prophet ﷺ. Today, I don't know. Maybe it's more. Maybe 26, 27. We hear about teachers of the Quran who pass all the way. Like they said, for example, there is a woman in Saudi Arabia. She passed away just a few years ago, and they said she had the shortest connection to the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam. So we lost one person. So now we are, so she was probably 25 teachers between her and the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So now that she died away, and she has, maybe it's only 26 or 27.
Who gives the ijazah? I mean, like the previous teacher will give it to you?
A person who has ijazah can give ijazah. Yeah. And they are very particular that you cannot make any mistake. I mean, they will not give you the ijazah until you can recite the whole Quran without a single mistake.
Memorized.
Memorize, yeah.
Memorized.
Memorize, yeah. Yeah. So they can tell you, keep reciting it 10 times, 100 times until you get it right. Okay. Yeah. And the ijazah means your pronunciation should be right and your memory should be right.
So the previous person has ijazah, has to give you the big letter.
He will give you the letter, yes. He would give you letter and write that.
25, 30, 100.
Yes, yes. Yeah. And once you get ijazah, you can teach. So they want to make sure also that you can teach. Many people who memorize the Quran in our community, I tell them, please go get ijazah. We have several brothers in our community memorize the Quran. Please get ijazah so that you can go and teach other people and give ijazah yourself. But it needs time. You need really to dedicate a lot of time. I want to just mention some important verses in the Quran, and then we'll conclude, inshallah. So we have 20 minutes left. The opening of the Quran, that's the first chapter in the Quran. It starts with the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Praise be to Allah, the church and sustainer of the words, most gracious, most merciful, master of the day of judgment. You do we worship, and you we seek for aid. Show us the straight way, the way of those on whom you have bestowed your grace, those whose portion is not wrath and did not go astray. I copy this translation from Yusuf Ali, use Old English, but I'm using modern English when I read it. Yeah, this is Yusuf Ali. Yeah. So everybody memorizes this. Any Muslim, when you first learn Islam and you learn prayer, you memorize this. So in every rak'ah you need to recite this. And the Prophet ﷺ said, no salah is accepted without reciting this chapter. So when people are new Muslims, they recite it in English, but they have to know it in Arabic, just as soon as you can. Next, I want to share with you is chapter number 2, verse 255. And according to the tradition of the Prophet, this is the greatest verse in the Quran. Not the longest, but the greatest verse. Talks about Allah. Say, Allah, there is no God but He, the living, the self-subsisting, eternal. No slumber can seize Him, nor sleep. His are all things in the heavens and on earth. Who is there to intercede in His presence except as He permits? So nobody can intercede on the Day of Judgment except with the permission of Allah. It talks about that. So a child, a pious child can, with the permission of Allah, can intercede on behalf of his parents. Or a parent can intercede on, a pious parent can intercede on his child, or so on. The martyrs, those who sacrifice their life for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether in battle or in any other cause, many people, they lose their life for a cause that they live for. So they become, and Prophet said, most of my ummah, the shuhada, will not die in battle, will die normal life, because they spend their life and their effort and their health for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a martyr would intercede on 70 people, of their relatives and acquaintances. So it's a great honor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give to whomever He wants. He knows what is before and after His creatures. They cannot encompass His knowledge except as He wills. So every knowledge we have is with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it's scientific knowledge or anything else. It's by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gives it to whoever He wants. His throne does extend over the heavens and the earth. That's why it's called the verse of the throne, Ayat al-Arsh. Talks about the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Extends over the heavens and the earth, and He feels no fatigue in guarding and preserving them, for He is the Most High, the Most Supreme. Another verse comes right after it. The next chapter from that chapter. And it's no coincidence, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling Muslims there is no compulsion of religion. Islam, which is the most beautiful religion, the last religion to mankind, but know that you cannot force people, do not scare people to change their faith. There is no compulsion in religion. Truth stands out clear from error. Whoever rejects evil and believes in Allah has grasped the most trustworthy handhold that never breaks. And Allah hears and knows all things. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's why all minorities, wherever Muslim went, they are intact up to today. Whether it's the Hindus, the Buddhists in the Far East, whether they are the Christians in the Middle East, they all remain intact. Islam spread by conviction. Muslims, when they moved to North Africa, Egypt, and Syria, after one generation, they went 2% of the population. They never forced anybody to convert. In 300 years, it was 100% of the population. With just sheer conviction and people getting attracted to Islam. And many enemies of Islam or critics of Islam say that, because Muslims, they imposed the jizya, which is it's called a tax. And that jizya was actually to keep the non-Muslims on a par with Muslims. Muslims had to pay the zakah, which is a much higher tax than the jizya. So every Muslim has to pay 2.5% of his wealth every day, every year. This is the highest tax you can find. And this is how Islam fights poverty and how Islam encourages the rich people to share. So the zakah is much higher than the jizya. So the argument that non-Muslims converted because the jizya was too high for them, that's not true. Muslims pay the zakah, which is much, much higher. And the zakah is obligatory. Muslims cannot pay the zakah to build mosques, except where you are in a minority, like in United States or so on. But in Muslim countries, you cannot use your zakah money to build a mosque. There are 8 categories of zakah. So Muslims have to be much more generous to do institutions and masajid and so on. Another verse called in Surah An-Noor, chapter of the light, because of this ayah mentioned in the middle of the chapter. I'll let you read it yourself. So it starts with saying Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth, and the parable of His light. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a parable of His light. So the Sahaba were asked, what does it mean? What does this parable mean? So the one who explained it was Ibn Abbas, which was closest to the Prophet, and the Prophet he said he's going to be the one who will explain the Quran for you, Turjuman al-Quran. He said, this parable is the human being. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the light that He puts in the heart of the human being. It's the parable here is talking about a lamp that's like the light that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts some light in the human being. And that human being is the human being who believes in Allah. That's when the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shines into the heart of the believer. It's interesting that in all medieval masajid, you always find this lamp in all the masajid. Something like this, but much more beautiful than this. It's just, and it's written on it, that verse. So Muslims love this verse, and they put it in all the mosques in medieval time. And still they have it in modern masajid also. This is Surah An-Nur. Mishkat. Mishkat. Yeah. This is in Surah Fussilat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to be forgiving. And how when you forgive people, even those who do bad for you, you would win their hearts. And who speaks better than he who calls to Allah while he himself does good and says, I'm surely of those who submit. And not alike are the good and the evil. Repel evil with what is best. When Lord, he between whom and you, it was an enmity, would be as if you were a warm friend. And then this repeated in several places in the Quran. And the last verse here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, whenever you are seduced by shaitan, by Satan, just remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's mentioned in many places in the Quran. Just always remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so He protects you from the seduction of shaitan. This is the one of the short chapters near the end of the Quran called Al-Ikhlas, sincerity. Say, He is Allah, the one and only one, Allah the eternal, absolute, He begets not, nor is He begotten, there is none like unto Him. This is what we teach our children since they are 2 years old. So these are verses, and Surah Al-Falaq and Surah Al-Nas, that's the first thing you teach it with, the opening of the Quran. The first verse and chapter in the Quran, and the last 3 chapters in the Quran, they are as short like this one. We teach to our children so that they comprehend really the essence of Islam. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever memorizes this is as if he memorized 1/3 of the Quran, because he got the whole message. It just summarizes the message of the Quran. There are some aspects of the Quran that I'll conclude with it. The linguistic signs, nobody could really replicate something similar to the Quran. Even among the Arabs, who are the most eloquent people. The Arabic language is one of the most beautiful languages of human civilization. And many linguists say that it was the original language of that all human beings, where all languages sprang forth. That was the miracle at the time of the Prophet. But in our time, most Muslims don't speak Arabic. The Arabs are a minority right now in the Muslim world. So what are things? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put a lot of other things in the Quran to show its miraculous origin. So there are historical and social signs. The Quran predicted things in the future, and they came to happen after the Prophet ﷺ. There are spiritual signs. Many people they feel comfort with the verses of the Quran. People who are, in particular in our time, where people are afflicted with all psychological problems and depression and so on, the Quran gives them relief. For people who live at the time of science and logic, social and scientific signs are very clear in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the universe. When Allah mentioned in Surah Al-Anbiya that the whole universe was one piece. Now this is knowledge that we've known only just in the 20th century. The whole heaven and the earth were one piece, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has split them apart. That's one aspect. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in another verse said, and the heavens are expanding. This is a fact that was known only in the 20th century. And the scientists who described this is Hubble. This is the scientist that Hubble telescope is named according to him. He discovered that the whole universe is expanding. This is in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the creation of the fetus in the mother womb, and many other things. And even the intricacies of the grammar. Like in Surah Al-Nahl, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has subjugated the sun and the moon for your service, for the service of human being. And the heavens, Allah has subjugated them. He did not subjugate it to you. Because they are so far, the stars have no effect on the human beings. Islam forbids astrology, by the way. So you cannot believe in astrology or magic or anything of that sort. So the stars are so far, they're only as guidance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the stars are guidance for you when you travel on earth. But they have no effect on you. The sun heats the earth when the sun, and even we know now it affects us more than we thought. If the sun goes through a solar storm, it can disrupt communications on earth. And one happened just few weeks ago. The sun radiation reaches the earth, and it's very dangerous unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has subjugated it by having the magnetic field of the earth and so on. The moon, we count the time with it. It gives us light during the night. So these were subjugated to the service of human being. But the stars are subjugated for other purposes. So it's amazing just how the grammar, when you read the grammar in Surah Al-Nahl, you see that distinction. Taha, what does it say? وهو الذي سخر لكم وهو الذي سخر لكم الليل والنهار والشمس والقمر والنجوم مسخرات بأمره. طه ما شاء الله من a lot of Quran. So the nujum are musakharat, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said musakharat to who? But with the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many other intricacies like this, you find it in the Quran. There is organization science, and I wanted to mention, but for lack of time, but there are certain things you find in the Quran that are very interesting. Surah Yusuf is what's the order in the Quran? It's 12. But Yusuf and his brothers were how many? 12. So you look at Surah Al-Baqarah. In the middle of Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made you a middle nation. That verse is in the middle of Surah Al-Baqarah. Surah Al-Baqarah has 286 verses. Middle nation, 143. There are many amazing things like this. Surah Al-Nahl, the bee. The bee is chapter number 16. And the number of chromosomes in the bee is 16. Surah Al-Najm, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Al-Najm is a hawa. The stars when they collapse. These are scientific facts. These at the time of the Prophet, people did not understand. And that's why the Quran says there are verses that you will understand, some verses you will not understand. They are left for future generations. When the star collapses, we know from astronomy that this is how life is created. Hubble telescope and James Webb telescope, when they look at the very first stars billions of years away, they were huge stars made out of helium and hydrogen. That's it. But then they are so big that they collapse eventually. And when they collapse, all the elements of the universe are created. All the chemical elements of the universe are created. So the collapse of the stars is what created life. And all the chemicals, 92 chemicals in the universe. Without the collapsing of the stars, there would be no life. Nothing would be created. There will be no planets. Nothing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Hadid, iron. And this surah the number of the surah is number 57. And this is one of the atomic numbers of atoms. Many what they call isotopes. So it's one of the of the isotopes of iron. And it's mentioned in verse 26, and the iron atomic number is 26. So there are many things like this in the Quran. And the last one I'm going to touch, again, Surah Al-Najm, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالنَّجْمِ is Hawa, talking about the stars. وَأَنَّهُ خَلَقَ الذَّكَرَ الْأُنْثَى مِنْ نُطْفَةٍ إِذَا تُمْنَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created man and woman from a sperm. What's the verse number? 46. We are made of 46 chromosomes. That comes from the sperm of a man and woman. 2 verses later, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَنَّهُ رَبُّ الشَّعْرَ. Allah, الشَّعْرَ is the brightest star in the sky. The Arabs called it الشَّعْرَ, and from which comes Surahs. It's the brightest star in the sky. And in verse 49, what's 49 has to do with this? In the 19th century, when people started having powerful telescopes, they looked at that and they found it consists of 2 stars. Star that we see, the brightest one, and there are a dimmer star that goes around it in 49 years. And so on. I can keep going on. So there are amazing things in the Quran, and out of mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for those who don't speak Arabic. And science, people appreciate science, or people appreciate social science or medical science, and so on. So I'll stop here, inshallah, and if there are comments and questions.
But I remember one time when you explained that Surah Tawbah is like 9/11, the Surah, their ayah is Surah Tawbah or some ayah.
Which one?
Like a 9/11 number.
That's stretching it too hard. Yeah, that's stretching it. I did not. Somebody on the internet. Yeah. I don't agree with this interpretation.
Which is the longest ayah?
What is it? Ayatul Dain. The longest verse, Ayatul Dain, at the end of Surah Al-Baqarah.
Or the number?
It talks about debt. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا تداينتم بدين إلى أجل مسمى. Who you believe, if you loan each other money, and it goes into details of how to write the contract. And that's why you see the Quran addresses all aspects of life, economic, trade, commerce, and so on. Any comments? I'm done here. I have just some pictures I may want to show you. So these are some of the calligraphy, modern times calligraphy of verses from the Quran. This is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim in different kind of calligraphy. So this is an art that many Muslims have perfected over the years. And they decorated the mosques with all of these writings. That's why when you enter any mosque, you'll find a lot of this, and particularly medieval mosques, there are a lot of writings on the walls. These are different calligraphic. This is a style, and these are different styles here. These are old Qurans. Anybody went to the display that they had in the Smithsonian a few years ago about Islamic? What was it called tonight? Yeah, it was very beautiful. They showed a very small Quran. It's just, you can hold it in your finger, the whole Quran. And they found a very big one. So they said the story of these two is that a scribe went to Tamerlane. He was a Mongol who pretended to be Muslim, but he was, Allah knows. Anyhow, but he was a big tyrant. So he brought him that small Quran. So I spent my life writing the Quran in this very small script. And he offered him. He said, no. He was not impressed. You know, dictators, they think big. So the same scribe came back with a very big Quran. It was on display. Dan Timmerman was very impressed. He said, very good. So he ordered him a lot of big reward for bringing the big Quran. And that was much easier than doing that very small.
Does that mean that the small Quran, they wrote by hand?
Yes,
computer
yeah,
by hand?
no, by hand.
Wow.
By hand.
I've seen the small size.
Yeah. That's,
You must have your
yeah. Yeah. These are modern printing. Yeah. This is again. This is modern Quran, and most of the prints of the Quran you'll find it has to be certified. So like this one here, it's certified by in Saudi Arabia. When you say Rasm al-Osmani, what does it mean? I mean, this is a tricky question.
I think it's the script that the time of Ottoman.
Yes. When I was young, I thought that this is according to the Ottomans, but that was not right. It's according to the writings of Osman, which was the third predecessor after the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, more prints here. These architectural ornaments on different buildings. See, these are very these big arches in all the mosques. If you visit Istanbul or visit Central Asia, you find these very huge structures, and you'll find verses of the Quran everywhere.
Does it mean that the water in the middle, is that design or is that for wudu?
It could be for wudu. You're right. Yeah, most of the masajids in Turkey, for example, or Central Asia, they have the wudu area outside, and particularly the restrooms outside, not within the confine of the masjid. Is it Maghrib? Yep, it's Maghrib time. So these are more architectural buildings. This is a modern building in Alexandria, Egypt. I took that picture myself some time ago.